Hello and welcome to part 2 of my beginner's guide for Book of Hours. In this one, I will be talking about how to unlock new soul fragments, how to unlock skills and how that system in general works, and how to read books and how that system in general works as well. By the end of this video, I hope you will have all the tools to enjoy the mysteries of Hush House. I won't touch all of the things, so there's still a lot to discover and a lot of material for an advanced guide in the future. That being said, let's get on into our actual topic for today. So at this point, this is where we left off at the end of part 1. Things look like this. If you want to follow up or you struggle a little bit, just rewatch the first video. Here we can now just select our journal and start reading it. This is the first thing that we got to do to develop our character further. We will gain new insights about our background story and all those things, so I really recommend you to read these, not skim over them like I do here. And these here are, there we go, new soul fragments. You get a couple for free here at this point, so you get to read that book one more time. You just put in whatever you want. The only important thing by the second time is that, let's do it one more time. So here it's the first time that you actually need to interact with the stats of the book. Before that, it really didn't matter what you put in. But at this time, the first time when you see this, you need to take a look at the challenge of the book. It's a lantern book, therefore whatever you put in should have this aspect to beat the challenge. This is the idea behind it. So if we put the rain into the memory slot where it'll fit, it has grail and nectar aspects. So it's no use at this point, so we might as well leave it for something else. So we put in Frost, which happens to have 2 points of lantern, and here we get the response that we have enough of that. This is how the whole mystery solving in general works. You try to pile up as much of a certain aspect on the challenge as is needed by whatever means possible. And there's lots of means possible. So now we're starting to read our own journal, and this will give us a new reward, namely the first skills. So after that's been done, we get our first lessons. So lessons go on over to the memories, but they are different than memories. Lessons won't fade by the break of dawn. They persist until a very special moment, let's say special season, which destroys all lessons by the end of it. So you should use them at a certain point, but you don't need to worry yourselves that badly. So these lessons can be put into the consideration window, and then you get to learn a new skill. Let's just do that once. And that transforms the lesson into an actual skill. So our first skill is called Bells and Braziers, and it offers us 2 points of Forge aspect, 1 point of Sky aspect. And every skill is also attuned to 2 arcane schools, let's call it like that. This one is attuned to Horror Magistry and Ethestry, so I'm going to talk about that in a hot minute. The 3 lessons of Pyroglyphics that we got, we will transform right away into something, into a skill as well. There goes. And now we got this wonderful thing here. So Pyroglyphics is another skill that has, again, 2 Forge aspect and 1 Lantern aspect. So it's a little bit of a variation of this. And it also has something unique for it. For example, this skill can be used to make candles. All those skills in the game have something special going on for themselves. This one can be attuned to Illumination and Ethestry as well. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. But before I go into the actual skill board, which is this one, I want to talk about these skills and how to upgrade them. So let's see, we're going to need a little bit of a piece of help here first. So it'll all make sense in a hot minute, don't worry. So the first thing that I'm doing here is now I'm grabbing anything out of the house, put it into the consideration skill bar, and I'm gonna, well, do I? Well, we need to wait until tomorrow for that. I'm gonna fast forward for that. Okay, fully armed with all of our skills, we can now do this. So we are going to put the skill now into the consideration window, and this is where you can upgrade the skill. So to upgrade a skill, you always need one lesson. This is a part that you cannot skip. This goes into the understanding. What's really important here is that the lesson is not the same as the skill. What's important is that the lesson has one of the aspects of the skill. So to upgrade pyroglyphics, you could take any lesson that has either forge or lantern, and you could upgrade it with that. This is very, very important to note. Now, our job is now to fill the other slots with cards that have either forge or lantern. Both can be applied. So into the effort slot, you always have to put a soul fragment. So that's why I had to rest, because I haven't had enough there. And now into this slot, you can either fit another lesson, but that's actually a bit of a waste, or you can put in memories or weather effects. Actually, I wanted to create a memory, so just so you know, you can take any item in the mansion, examine it here with the eye, and create a memory that's worth one lantern. Just as a side note. Here we're going to put the sunny weather in, because that'll work a charm too. And then we can upgrade it because we have filled every slot. This is the mini game to upgrade your skills. You always have to fill all slots, and you have to bring in one lesson, and the slots have to be filled with fitting aspects. And the higher the level of these goes, the more slots these gain, and the more different sources of aspects you need to fetch, so it gets more and more difficult. Okay, next step, over to the skill board. Here is where we can attune our skills to certain occult aspects. So this is an entire skill wheel, and it's actually less complicated than it looks. The first step, you put your journal into the center of this and you assign it. This gives you another soul fragment. And now our skills can be assigned to either of these skills. Each of these trees is featuring those occult skill lines, and when you pick up one of your skills, you notice that two of these boxes get outlined. We pick up this one, the same. So now you get to decide which one of these paths you want to follow. What's really cool to know is that you can preview what kind of soul fragment you will gain when you attune this. So if I put pyroglyphics in here, I gain this soul fragment, and if I put it here, I gain this one. And same goes for the other guy. I gain metal here, and I gain whist here. So my personal recommendation here is that you should always try to get the fragments that you don't have, and avoid those that you get double at the beginning at least. You want to have every soul fragment at least once, ideally. That just as a side note. So let's check out one more thing. So here I'm going to attune this to the Ithistry, and if you do so, you assign it, and now you gain another soul fragment. What this also does is, if you ever happen to find a challenge that is attuned to this occult path, you can now use this skill to solve the problem, because it's now in attunement for that. So to get deeper down the road, you will now require a new skill. What's really important to note is that these skills need to be at least rank 1. These skills need to be at least rank 2, and then so forth. Rank 3, rank 4, and so on and so forth. Here, pyroglyphics is already rank 2, so I can put it in here, and there we go. So this is how you go deeper down these paths. That's that. Okay, so this is roughly how the skills work. There are many, many challenges in the game where you will need these skills then. I'll leave it up to you to find out how that works in detail, but now you should be able to figure out the rest by yourself. Now, books. Books are a really, really important part of the game if you are a librarian. So books can be found either as a already identified, like this, or in an unidentified state like this. To identify them, you just need to put them into your window here, and then you just slap on some soul fragment. Doesn't matter which one, all of them can be used except for health. And then you get a identified book back. So we're going to identify those books here on the shelf. And your first thing that you'll be looking for are books that have a challenge rating. This is where you find it, of 4 or 6, because those are, as a matter of fact, the easiest to read. Generally, we already know how the challenges in this game work, so it should be clear by now that a book with a challenge level of 6 wants us to put at least 6 points of hard aspect into the skill challenge. So far, so clear. So we got now our books, and I want to put them in here. And I'm going to fast forward now a little bit up until the next day, where I got all my resources back to explain the book reading minigame a little bit more in detail. Now then, so at the beginning of the day, I have all my resources available and I got a new weather effect. So we're going to go here with the weather. Because the weather has a heart and a sky aspect, I'm going to pick up a book that has a heart mystery. So, few things that are important about books. First of all, they can be written in strange languages. The librarian has a lot of languages by default at the beginning of the game, but a couple of them you need to learn from visitors at the library. And books can be corrupted. If so, this will be shown here, and you should only read a corrupted book if you are able to break the corruption. Otherwise, you will suffer damage on your soul fragments that you will need to repair afterwards. Now, so we're going to read our first book. You put this now into the consideration window. So here things are pretty similar to the last journal. We know that we need to beat a score of heart of 6 at least. So soul fragment, jaw, and health have heart fragments. We're going to pick the bigger one. So we have 2 points already. We got skills. So sadly, none of our skills have any heart aspect. So skills can always be used for book reading, and they will become more and more useful by the time that you pass through more and more books. Right now, we could fill that slot, but we also can leave it open. It doesn't matter. And then there's the memory slot. This is where we can put things in here, whatever we want. Just be sure about one thing. Memory slot items will be used up by the action there, so you won't be keeping your lesson if you would be using a lesson. So don't use lessons for book reading. So here we put in the memory, and now we don't have the necessary 6 points yet, but that is not a problem because that's what the book reading minigame is good for. So if you have not all the points to begin with, you can still start it, and after a minute, you will begin to see a couple of confusing symbols at first. Here we go. So these things here are a couple of random things that will now give us a chance to gain the missing points. So we have now Duende, which will just give us a couple of random aspect points into our challenge. We cannot control that. We gain an extra effort soul, which will allow us to put another soul fragment into the challenge. And Ubisunt, which is another, it's just like Duende. It will just offer a random amount of points. These 3 things are always random. There's a lot of things that can happen. Sometimes you get to put in an extra soul effort. Sometimes you get to put in an extra skill, an extra memory. But what's really cool is sometimes you also gain slots like comfort or whatever, which allows you to utilize all those items that are standing around in the library, which is a really cool part of the minigame. The downside of it is you will never know which 3 aspects will get drawn onto your thing. Here, we just get to ditch in our health soul aspect, which gives us the last remaining point of heart, and that is how we resolve that. Here, a couple of tips and tricks in regard of that. First of all, try to have always a second soul fragment that competes with the challenge. so you can't just flip in a second one, because the extra soul fragment actually happens almost every time when you try to read a book. Also, try to have a memory on your hand, which can also be put in there. Extra memories can be acquired by looking at things or reading books that you have already read a time. There's various ways to craft memories in the game. And at the end of the day, yeah, just take a little bit of a risk. But it is important to note that if you fail to get the points together, the reading challenge fails, and there is a chance that one of your soul fragments gets damaged in the process, and then you need to heal up yourself in a bed. And yeah, it's not the end of the world, but it can be a problem. So at this point, we now have beaten the challenge, and you get some read here about what's in the book. I highly recommend you to read these, because these are extra informations that you don't get permanent access to. And then after that, you see that you have mastered this book. Reading a book will always give you a new temporary memory, but more importantly, will give you new lessons. With these new lessons, you can now either learn new skills or upgrade your existing skills. I highly recommend you to learn as many skills as you need to fulfill your skill board here, and rest assured that, well, skills have their uses, and there are very, very many different rooms in the Hush House, and therefore, yeah, you should really try to find your own pacing between using lessons always to learn something new, or using lessons just to upgrade your existing skills. I'm personally pleading for variety is at the beginning of the game more important than mastery. But find your own way. This is where you have, well, the world at your hands, and I hope you found this helpful. There are, of course, way more things to explore in the game. Feel free to ask away in the comment section. I am already working on an advanced guide where I'll be talking about the crafting system and how to evolve your soul fragments into upgraded versions of these. So stay tuned. That being said, thanks for watching, thanks for your time, and I hope you enjoyed. Leave a thumbs up if you did. Consider subscribing, I really appreciate having you folks, and have a wonderful day.